Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Talented Learning Executive Briefing Series. This is my favorite series of content because we get to travel the world virtually and meet with the best learning system solutions the world has to offer. Today's no different. We're in Edinburgh, Scotland, and we're going to learn all about Administrate. Now, those of you who've been following along Talented Learning, this won't be the first time. We've have at least 3 or 4 updates over the years from John Peebles, who is the founder and CEO of Administrate. And so it's always exciting to get John back on the show here and back on this episode so we can see all the progress of the last year. And you're going to see things today that you haven't seen anywhere else in the world. I guarantee it because I know what's coming. John, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. I can't believe it's been a year since the last time we talked and did this. And just for context, for those of you who aren't familiar with Administrate and kind of why we exist, I've got a few slides that I thought would be helpful to walk through. And John, of course, you jump in for clarification or if I get off track. And then yeah, we'd love to show you some really key updates that have happened over the last kind of 12 months, especially that we're really excited about. So
All right.
I'll
All right. Let's get going.
just dive in here and share my screen. And, you know, effectively, this is the core thesis of why we exist. And that is that planning, organizing, and executing tons of live training is an administrative nightmare. And you see what we did there with that pun, hence the name.
As a dad, I appreciate that. Go ahead.
And live training, just to make sure we're on the same page, that's classroom synchronous training, but it could also be via Zoom or using some sort of virtual collaboration tool. It's the type of training that is not self-paced, that requires folks to come together at a certain place and time. And these are some of the challenges that we have when we try to deliver this type of training, and these will be all too familiar if you face them. One of the interesting things that I found over the years is that while we've all been to school and we've all gone to classes every day for portions of our life, many of us have never stopped to think about the complexities that are involved behind the delivering of classroom training. And so it's things like making sure the right people are available to teach, making sure their schedules are lined up, making sure that when you start to schedule multiple classes with all these different teachers and students needing to go to them, that the puzzle pieces are falling into place, that communications happen, making sure everyone knows where they need to go. If changes happen or things come up, like instructors getting sick and so forth, you're going to be left scrambling, but hopefully that scramble could be a little easier. Unfortunately, this dynamic is very difficult to solve. Most companies today in the world are solving it with software built by our biggest competitor, which is Microsoft, because they make Excel, although increasingly it's Google Sheets as well. And another dad joke for you there. That's a shame because this type of training, classroom synchronous training with really high quality instruction, is one of the best ways to get folks either out there, selling or on the job or whatever it is they need to do, or to deliver change across an organization. And unfortunately, the reason why it is difficult and time consuming is because of all of this kind of administrative burden. And so really, Administrate, us, the company, the product, is what we call a training management system that's built specifically for in-person training. And a lot of times people are like, well, that sounds great. How do you do this? Well, I'd like to kind of show you 4 different pieces of our platform where it's a large platform. There's a lot of depth that we could get into, but there's kind of 4 key concepts here. And that is, we help folks plan, and we do that through these reusable resource templates that can help kind of lay out exactly what needs to happen. We help with the scheduling challenge. We want to make sure that you can build out schedules, not only for next week or next month, but maybe a quarter or 6 monthly or a year in advance, without kind of the fear that creeps in when you're trying to do that. And we want to help you communicate all of those, things that need to be sent at the right times to the right people and so forth. And then ultimately, no matter how well you plan, no matter how tight the schedule is, no matter how great the communications are, issues are going to come up. Uh, Resources are going to be needed to go for maintenance. Classrooms will become unavailable. Folks will get sick. There's a whole bunch of different reasons, and so we try to just help you solve those problems when they appear. And so this is usually the next question that we get, which is like, oh, so you're an LMS. Uh, and we've been talking about this for a number of years. We are not a learning management system. Learning management systems are really great at what they do, and I've kind of maybe oversimplified it a little bit here, but this is kind of the core mechanic, if you will, for how a learning management system works in terms of putting out e-learning for students to consume. And that is, my blue box up there, I do my course creation, and that involves, grabbing all the content and, details about, what you're going to get in terms of certifications, and maybe I'm selling it. So I put some pricing on it and all the metadata that I need to describe this course. And I go through and I do all of that. And that's not easy. I'm not downplaying that or whatever, but you build your course and you've got this kind of e-learning thing, and then you publish it out there, and then students get added. Maybe they're adding themselves, maybe they're being added through an HR system, or you're doing it as a training team member. And the nice thing about e-learning is that the administrative work at this point is mostly done, right? Because you've built this course and you've pushed it out there and you've let it go out free into the wild, and it lives out there for as long as you choose to let it do so. And unfortunately, that's not the dynamic that happens with classroom training. And so what I've tried to illustrate here is you got to do all that stuff in terms of the course content, the pricing, delivery details, certifications, and so forth. But you also have to think about other things like resources and where you're going to hold the class. And that could be a classroom, that could be a city, that could be, a variety of different choices you're going to make there. Personnel, often specific personnel are required, not only to teach the whole course, but maybe you need to bring in experts for various sessions kind of midway through and so forth. So that's a thing to consider. And then all those communications, because it's not sufficient to just get one email that says here's your login and the link to go to a place. The location might be changing every day. If you've got a lab, you might need to go to a separate building with different equipment and so forth. And so those communications are pretty dynamic and pretty constant. And then what happens is you publish the course and people start to register onto it, and folks go through the entire course, and then it ends. And unfortunately, if you want to run that course again, you've got to go through this entire cycle again. And maybe you can sort of store some of the information like your course content and pricing and so forth. But often you're retyping this. And even if you can store that stuff, you still got to go through and re-add all the personnel and location and make those decisions. And if you're running hundreds and hundreds of courses a month, which many of our customers are because we serve primarily large multinational companies, then you're having to do this hundreds and hundreds of times. And that's where the challenge really comes into play. And so what we have tried to do with Administrate is really think about this problem in a different way than the traditional LMS would, because it's a completely different problem. And basically, we introduce this concept that we call course templates. And it basically lets you say, here is a template for all the things that you need to think about in order to run a class, whether it's a virtual class or an in-person class. And then we also want to build in these concepts of locations and resources and who's allowed to teach and so forth, so that when you go to the scheduling of this class, you are being helped by the system and prompted and saying, these are the things you need to think about, and here they are, and which ones would you like to choose? So when we kind of think about this classroom training problem, you've got the LMS doing a very good job at the kind of surface level e-learning things. And I'm not trying to downplay that by any shot, but in terms of work, 80 to 90% of the work that's involved in delivering classroom training, unfortunately today, happens usually outside of systems and in spreadsheets and in people's heads and on whiteboards and so forth. And so when you think about the cost of this, What is the impact? Well, if you don't have Administrate and you're running lots and lots of classroom training, which most of corporate America is, uh, that means that you're spending huge amounts of time. And I mean, we have customers that have training administration teams of dozens or hundreds of people that are focused solely on this task of getting these classes running and running well. And that's time that you could be spending improving your training that we hope to give back to you if you become our customer. And so, really, in terms of what this means, most of our customers will save 90% of the time that they spend on the administrative kind of work to deliver classroom training, particularly at scale. They can then take that time, plow it in to investing in their training and their product, and just even the quality, and looking back at what they can do better. And they've got all this time that they didn't have, and they can take feedback and so forth. And so our customers tend to average 40% learner growth within the first year. And that continues over the next few years. I think the worst that we ever saw was 25% learner growth. And then it kicked up in year 2 and 3. And they don't have to add any additional staff because we're simply just unlocking the folks' time that are already there. And so, just to kind of bring this home a little bit, and then we'll kind of show you some tangible things within the system. Our promise to you is within 90 days, we're really confident we can reduce the administrative workload that you're experiencing by 80 to 90%. That means that you can now scale and plow that time savings into things that are really important to you. Maybe you want to grow as a company. Maybe you've got some strategic initiative that needs time invested in and so forth. And then once that you've freed up that time, you can now start to integrate with other systems kind of within the first year. That provides a ton of benefit. Get those learning management systems that you have tightly integrated with Administrate into one kind of fabric that you can then use to build out and plan for the future. You now have a platform and infrastructure. And we've done a series of talks around, how does AI impact particularly enterprise and corporate training? Well, we kind of believe that the first port of call to an AI strategy is making sure that you've got the infrastructure in place to house your data, organize your data, and feed these AI tools. And so often I'll put in a little hand-drawn plus AI for the future, but you need that platform. And so for the future, that's something that we really get satisfied and we really like to see with customers is they solve this kind of lower level problem. It's a huge problem, but it's just, not super valuable where the time's going. And then they can start really planning and do great things for the future. And so for today, I kind of thought it'd be nice to show these kind of 4 core concepts in terms of how the system does this. Course templates, we've talked about doing some classroom scheduling, looking at how we think in terms of communications and tasks, and then a problems dashboard that we've just released that we're really excited about. But before I jump in the system, I just want to concrete this idea of a course template with one of these. I don't know if it's a game or it's a toy that my niece, who was just a couple years old, she's older now, she's 5, had when she was very young. And that is, it was this wooden block that had shapes cut out from it. And then she had a bunch of different shapes that she would try to basically fit through the gaps in the wooden block. And so in this example, there's, a star, and I don't know if that's a clover or what those shapes are. But basically, this is what we kind of feel is a decent metaphor for a course template. And that is, you are basically saying to run basket weaving 101 or, skydiving 201, you need these resources. You need to be able to run it in these locations, and these personnel are required or qualified to teach this course. And so the system then will narrow down and only let you choose from the correct shapes of the things that you need. And so then that helps you build out a scheduled event very, very quickly. And the other concept that we think in terms of, and we'll kind of show, and you'll see this as we go through, is this concept of offsets. Now, It might not be the best name ever, but we've got an example in the upper right, and that's basically talking about a trigger. We want something to happen. But instead of choosing a specific day like you would have to do in a traditional LMS, Monday, April 12th or whatever, I don't know, whatever the day would be. Um, you instead say 2 days before or 2 days after the classrooms start, right? And so again, we're thinking in this templated way, and then that will then send out a communication based on the date that you eventually go and schedule. And you don't have to think about it anymore. The computer does all the date calculations for you. And so there's some philosophical things that we try to impart in our product that we think really help achieve this 90% kind of workload reduction. And that is, we want to make sure that we do as much as we can in terms of patterns. That's to help for scalability. We don't want folks in Egypt doing things differently from China, doing things differently from here in Scotland to the US. We want this training to be patterned out and as scalable as possible. And that means in order to do that, we try to use templates as much as possible, which then leads us to be able to automate as much as possible. Now, sometimes when we're going through this, we see some people starting to twitch and they're like, well, but I don't want the computer to be controlling my entire life. And, this is how the Terminator movies started. And that's true. And so one of our core philosophies is we really believe that our customers, these training administrators and directors of training, these training teams are rock stars, and they really know their business in ways that a computer will never be able to compete with. And so you can always override. The system will warn you and kind of bring your attention to things that it thinks are a problem, but you're going to be able to make the decision at the end of the day. And really, what we're trying to do is to provide this concept, which we call decision support within the product. And I'll show you some examples of this. But before I do that, maybe a definition of decision support would be helpful, because I was talking about this with actually a board member of ours who joined last year. Great guy. And I was telling him, one of the things we think is really important is this concept of decision support. And he was like, what the hell is decision support? And he's like, did you just make this up? And I said, well, I don't know. And I thought about it a little bit more. And I kind of thought this is probably the best description of decision support that I can think of. And that is, this is the trench run in Star Wars Episode 4, the first old one, right? A New Hope. And if we remember, towards the end of the movie, we're trying to blow up the Death Star and we're outgunned and outmanned. We only have tiny fighters and we're going up against a big battle station. And so there's this trench that Luke Skywalker and his fighters have to fly down, and they're firing at them and so forth. And when they get into the trench, the exhaust port is only a couple meters wide, and it's not. I promise I haven't watched this movie too many times, but as they fly down the trench, right, they're going at high speed. There's lasers going by. They've got to hit this very small target in order to start a chain reaction. And so what happens is they push a button, and this flight computer comes down and it covers one eye, and you can see an example of what they're looking at. It's a countdown timer, and it's basically the computer saying, here's how close you're getting, and when you get to the point where you need to push the button to fire the torpedo, it will let you know. And the reason that we love this metaphor at Administrate is because I feel like our customers, the training administrators, are Luke Skywalker, right? They are Jedi. They have supernatural powers. They've been able to keep this thing together for years and years and years with very little support and very little software. And they're fighting this battle, right? They're trying to just get over these insurmountable odds. And so Administrate is that computer, right? You can use it and it can help you and it can really guide you down towards the path of where you want to go. But you can also be a Jedi and you don't have to use the computer. If we remember from the film, he actually turns his computer off and he makes the shot using the Force. And so this is kind of this idea. We want the system to surface problems and provide potential solutions as much as possible, but ultimately you are still in control. So what do you think?
Demo time.
Was that clear?
That's clear. Cool. So, to summarize on an ideal customer profile, I think so. LMSs, in addition to launch an eLearning. Also, generally now have the capability to launch like a Zoom class. But where I see the difference between a TMS and an LMS, launching a Zoom class is, you key this information in once. There is no template concept, so you have this one-off class, and or maybe you schedule it, every now and then, but it's one-off. You might be doing, five of these a week, or five of these a month, or something like that, and you can handle it. Generally, doing it manually. Conversely, if you're a global company, you might have what, hundreds of trainers and
Oh yeah,
thousands,
I'd say thousands, because
thousands of trainers,
many of these are
locations.
fractional, right? They're not necessarily full time. They've got other jobs and they're just pulled in as SMEs to train a particular piece of particular class.
So you got thousands of potential instructors. You got dozens of languages that you're doing it in, hundreds of different locations, buildings with rooms, that are different, equipment. A lot of times for these live classes, they're real equipment, flight
Yes.
simulators, and
Yep.
driving Bobcat tractors around, and tearing an engine apart. There's all that kind of stuff that has to be scheduled. And additionally, a lot of times it's not one session. So it could be like once a week for 52 weeks or something like
Yes.
that, that you're going to do stuff. And so that level of complexity, if anybody's listening and any of those type of scenarios ring true, you're leaving tons, well, 90% of your efficiency on the table, as it turns out.
Yeah,
Continue.
there's another great example of this is the intensive kind of weekend course, right? So folks will fly in on a Thursday, they'll train all weekend and fly out either the Monday morning or the Sunday night. And that kind of compresses, or even more so pressurizes the environment, because if anything goes wrong, they're just there and they're going to be
Mhm.
twiddling their thumbs until you kind of fill that time and figure out how you're going to kind of reshuffle the schedule. And your example about Zoom invites, comes a lot of complexity there. Who owns the Zoom meeting? Is it the instructor? Well, what if the instructor changes? And like you said, there could be multiple different instructors, and maybe some of the class is coming in person and some of the class is going remote. Should they all get the same Zoom link? It becomes very, very difficult, and it's not necessarily as easy as just copying and pasting a link in, or hitting schedule and a bunch of Zoom links fired out when you've got these very complicated courses.
Mhm, mhm. And last little scenario. So you say you're one of these organizations that we're talking about. How do you have to plan your year in advance, don't you, or your quarter in advance, and try to
Yeah,
you have to,
usually
because you have to publish that stuff. So it has to
yeah,
you have to play that
you,
chess like long
usually
before
at
you know.
least quarterly in advance is kind of our experience, and it depends on how far out you'll go. But if you think about it, this is even more acute for customer training, because if you're selling your training to customers, or it's required in order for them to access your product, you know, this stuff needs to be in the calendar multiple months in advance, because people are booking flights. Oftentimes they are carving off huge portions of their week, or they need this training before they can even log in. For example, in a lot of the healthcare and med tech space, they're FDA regulated. You're not logging into that blood analyzer to run jobs until you are certified. So that then pressurizes the whole thing. And like we were saying, even if you have the best plan in the world, which is very difficult to get, then it may not be optimized, and things are going to go wrong. People are going to get sick. They're going to go on maternity leave. They're going to have unfortunate family circumstances that requires them to take time off, and that's just the people side of things, let alone buildings and equipment and all that. So it's a very big challenge, and it costs millions and millions of dollars for companies all around the world.
Awesome, awesome. Well, that's the difference
So
between an LMS and a TMS.
yeah. Yeah, and like LMSs are great at what they do, It's just there's just a whole piece and a whole bit of tooling that's missing from this kind of training stack, if you
In
will.
audience, you may be wondering, well, how come LMSs don't do this? Why don't they just do this? Because it's really hard. That's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I strongly believe, it makes sense, right? We didn't have this luxury of being able to pick which problem we wanted to solve, right? Because we were born within a training company. In fact, it's a software that was an internal tool that we wanted that was built in order to solve a very specific problem for a training company. And then as they solved it and talked with other people in their network, and people were like, we want to buy this. And so we kind of came from this solution. Whereas if you think about it, if you're going to go out there and be like, hey, what's a problem that we can solve and make a lot of money at and have a lot of success? E-learning has been hot for 10 to 15 to 20 years. And that makes a lot of sense to go there. We didn't have that choice. We were born within this problem domain. And I'm really thankful for that, because it's a real fun problem. And we've been able to deliver tons of value for folks. But it is kind of an unusual route. And that's why you don't see a lot of this being taken on out in the
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah.
So maybe if it's okay, I'll just dive into the product, John,
Please
and I'll bring over
bring it home for us.
my just a few examples. So I'm gonna come back to this dashboard. All right, this is what you would see when you log in, and I'll just get a little bit more space there. What I'm going to do is I'm just very quickly going to show an example of these course templates. That I was talking about. And so this is our block of wood that we're trying to, fit shapes through and so forth. And if I pick one of these in our demo system, you can see here there's all of this information that I can fill out. But where it gets interesting is where you start saying, look, these are the people that are approved to teach this. And here are the scheduling parameters that are to be used when we think about laying out the shape of a class. And so in this example, I want it to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I want it to start on a Wednesday. And this is a little bit complicated, but basically you can use all of these controls, and it will then lay out a kind of typical or best case shape of the class. In this case, we have 6 sessions, and you can see here's an example of these offsets, right? It's not concreted yet. We haven't scheduled it yet. This is just the template of what it looks like. I can add resources. So again, these are things that you would define. So it could be things like rooms, it could be labs, it could be fire engines, it could be simulators. There's a lot of folks that need a lot of equipment to be brought to bear in a way that students can access it. And if you forget this stuff, you can't run the class. So you can define these and assign them, and you can say that they're required for all sessions or just a few and so forth. And what this means is that then when I go and to create an event, if I click this green button up here, an event in our terminology is instantiated, scheduled class. Then I only have to do cyber security. I pick my template. It starts filling out all of the things that I need. I say I want to run in Atlanta, and there we go. With 3 pieces of data now, the system has laid out all the sessions. It has grabbed all the instructors, has put all the resources on it, and we're ready to go, right? And so you can see, rather than having to retype all of this stuff, we have saved a huge amount of time. In some cases, this could be hours and hours of time to get one class scheduled. And I'll kind of show some examples of why this is cool. One of the things that we're really excited about that has just come out is a calendar integration that we have now with Administrate. Now, we have always published a calendar feed of the classes that are scheduled, and we've always sent out calendar attachments to communications to students. But what we have not done until now is read calendars from either classrooms, i.e. meeting rooms, if you're sharing the resource, or instructors themselves. And so hopefully I can find a good example of this quickly. But now what happens is you can, as a training team, say to your instructors, hey, go and provide access to Administrate to your calendar. Now there's a couple privacy settings here. You don't have to, show all of the information on your calendar. Whether you went to the dentist or not, it can be blocked and hidden, but the time will be blocked off. And that means that if I come in here and I want to find an instructor, if I go down here and add an instructor, what it's going to do is the system now can tell me who is available and who is not. And if you're not available, it will tell me why to the extent that the privacy settings allow. And this means that, again, in the old days, I'd have to either go break out of this, I'd have to go in and check each of these calendars one by one all the time, remembering what date and time I'm looking for and so forth. And now today I can just go in and say, I'm going to put Franklin on this. And I know he's available because I've got up to date real time information from his calendar. And the minute that I add him here, then he's going to get updated and see that on his calendar. And we're really excited about this new feature. So it's in advanced testing right now, public beta, and it'll be rolled out in the next 30 days. And it's going to be a game changer. So we're really excited about it. Just an
Wow,
example
great.
of some of that decision support, you know.
And so what calendars is that for? Like Outlook, or is that
Yeah, right
somewhere else?
now it works with Outlook. Soon, Google Calendar will be coming, and then we're going to be working on a whole bunch of different, like, you know, Apple's I whatever it's called nowadays, iCloud, because
Mm,
some instructors, you know, won't necessarily have a company provided email address. They'll be running off their own personal calendars. So we're aiming to get 90% of the main calendars that are available out there to be used by this integration.
cool.
So that is something we're really excited about. I think I'll just try to find my notes here. One second. The next thing that I thought I would show very quickly is around communications. So we talked about how important that is. We've had this feature for a long time, but we've been making some nice updates to it. And I just thought it's always good to kind of remind everybody that this exists. And that is, we have this concept called triggers within our platform. And I'm going to pull up one here that's a reminder. And you know what? I'm going to do a new one. I'm going to go create a new one. These triggers can be SMS based or email based. Now, SMS, they have different uses. One's not better than the other. SMS is often used by folks that are overseas because that tends to be the way people work a bit more, and sometimes email deliverability is a bit difficult. But the key thing here is, I can choose my delivery mechanism. I can name this trigger, and I can basically say, I'm going to pick a target, right? Now, this could be uh, all events that happen within the system. This might be used for like joining instructions or whatever. There's a whole bunch of things. But if I chose like all events as my target, now I have a bunch of different trigger points. And again, these are things that have not yet been defined because we have not yet scheduled an event that it would apply to. But I can say before, when the event start happens, let's say that's December 1st. I can set up and say, well, 5 days before, I want this audience, maybe it's students, maybe it's everybody, whatever, to get this template of an email, course reminder, right? And then what will happen is the system will automatically queue up these emails and fire them off at the correct time and date and so forth. And that will happen whenever I create a new or schedule a new event. And I don't have to think about it. I don't have to worry about it. It saves so much time. And the important thing that we love to kind of remind people of is people struggle with this so much, right? You have to do a mail merge usually, and that means that they tend to only send maybe one reminder. If you're like me, you don't even look at your email or phone until the day before you got to be somewhere. And that means that the reminder that was sent 5 days ago or 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago, or that came when you registered for the class, is difficult to find. I may not even remember the title of the class or anything like that. So by having the ability to set up multiple reminders with different mechanisms of delivery and different timings, it means that the product really improves. And again, I'm not having to spend any more time on this. You can get a huge log of everything that goes out within the system. You can see whether it's delivered or not. That's very, very powerful. And so it's something that we just think is a great feature. And I'll just quickly show lots of different templates here. Course reminder again, this is an open source templating language called Jinja. We don't have to go into it, but basically, if you've got a web developer or a programmer on your team, they'll be familiar with this. These are merge codes, and you've got a huge library of all the different data within the system that you can go and grab and plop into these templates. And you can even do cool things like formatting and math, and you can loop through and all kinds of stuff. It's very, very powerful. And it means, again, that your product will stand out. And you can see here, we've got a iCal attachment as well for students. So they can, whenever there's a change, it will send out the updated iCal, and it's multilingual and all that type of stuff. Just a real good example of how we can save huge amounts of time.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I just know in my own life, when I'm running public webinars and things like that, I know in my head, okay, I got to do this at 5 days. I got to do this at one
Yeah.
day, and sometimes it's automatic, but a lot of times when it's on my shoulders, it slips. It's as simple as that. I know I have to do it, but I don't do it. And, just multiply that by 10,000, you
Yeah.
know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
there's
And
a lot of value there.
I love this story. One of the guys in our implementation team actually felt like this was such a powerful feature that he set up an instance of Administrate to run his soccer league, right? So, and it sent out all the reminders to all the parents and whatever, and it made me really laugh when we saw this. What is this instance here? So, you get perks if you work in Administrate. You can not only manage your own training, you can manage your own soccer league. As wild as that would be.
And maybe I ought to
Um,
spin that off
yeah.
as a football club product.
So the next thing that I thought I'd kind of tackle and show is updates to our scheduler, which is the tool that we have built to basically help teams work on those like quarter long or year long scheduling challenges. If you can imagine all of the mess that is required to schedule one class, multiply that out by 100 classes over months, and it's 100 times worse, and all of the interplay becomes very, very difficult. And so, what I'm going to show you here is basically this is our canvas, if you will, that we have provided to customers that helps them do this at scale. Now, I have already added a bunch of courses, but what I would do is I'd come in, there'd be a blank canvas here, and I can add and I can say, look, I want to run, flight safety. I want to run, however many of these courses, and I want to start them at this date. Okay. Now, I'm not going to do that here because I've already gone through a solve, but I would go out and each of these are different courses, and this is the number of classes that I want to run within this time frame. It's just Q2 in this case. And what I do is I go through and I lay out all my classes. I say, here's the instructors that are available based, again, being helped by the system. And then here's the resources that can be put in play. And when I go in and hit this solve button, what happens is we kick off a job that goes to a solver. It's got a bit of an artificial intelligence, not LLM or chat GPT, but just a bit of old school AI. And it starts not only getting a valid solve, but it also tries to optimize this schedule as good as it can. And so you can see in this case, we successfully solved. And then what we do is we present basically a canvas to the training team, and we say, this is what we think that your schedule should look like over the next, few months or however long that we're planning here. And I can then come in here and this is the kind of typical thing that we see, which is you go and you get the first solve and you look at it and you kind of squint and turn your head and whatever and look at it, and you send it out to your various stakeholders, and a bunch of emails start coming back, and instructors like, hey, I forgot to put in my holiday, right? And so then they put in that information, and you go resolve, right? And this is the very convoluted, very laborious process that has to be done manually today with Administrate, because it knows things like holidays and it's got the up-to-date calendars from the instructors, like I mentioned. Now that is a much faster, more agile process, and you can get those results back in minutes in many cases. And then I still may want to fiddle with this. I may just happen to know that April 8th is a big day for us as a company. I'm going to click on this and grab it. And what's happening here is a very powerful thing. And that is, this is the first of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 session course of flight safety. And when I pick up and hold this session, the computer is telling me that any day that has a green color on it is available. And there's no conflicts. But if I drop this onto this Monday, I'm going to have a conflict, right? And so if I do that right now, um, oh, love live demos. If I do that right now, which is what I did, it then pops up and gives me a warning. And I can come in here and I can see now that I've got a resource conflict, and that is room 2, right? I have a conflict with a required resource that I need in order to run this class. And I can come down here and see where that conflict is right here. And I could either unlink that resource and change it, or I can go all the way back up and say, you know what, I'm gonna undo that. I'm gonna move it to a green day. And this is just a small example of the power that you have when you've got this information at your fingertips. Again, I can ignore it and I can override it and say that I know best, or we can trust the computer and let it handle it for me.
Awesome. That's
Um,
cool.
Yeah, we're really excited about this. So again, this has gotten customers usually 80 to 90% of the way to a really good schedule. Then they then use this canvas and this tool set to get the next 10%. And that whole process shrinks from usually dozens of people, hundreds of hours to, a few hours spread over a week or so. And it's transformative.
Oh,
We're really
wow.
excited about it.
And so the alternative is you get your whole team in a room, shut the windows and doors, and start cranking this out manually.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
the only other option to do
it,
this.
it and it's soul destroying work, right? Because you're doing it in Excel. There's mistakes being made all over the place through nobody's fault. It's just the wrong tool. And every time you make a change, like I just showed, you have to go in and check all the calendars. You have to check the calendar for the resource. You have to check the calendar for the instructor. You have to check the calendar for every single thing, the classroom that needs to be there for that session. And even understanding what are the things that I need for flight safety, you have to make sure that somebody who knows that flight safety course is in the room with you, because you're like, hey, Bob, like, what kind of plane do we need for this again? Right. That type of stuff is difficult to keep track of.
Amazing.
The last thing that I thought I would show, because I know we've got limited time, is something that we're really excited about. We mentioned this on our blog a few weeks ago. We've done a couple LinkedIn live events around, and that is our issues dashboard. And this is, again, one of those kind of decision support examples where we're basically showing here are all the things that are happening. Um, and the over the next kind of 15 to 30 days. And there's a lot going on. And of the things that are happening, we've got some things that have issues. Now, one of the cool things about this is we're adding new types of issues to this kind of framework literally every week. So even the next couple of weeks, we'll be rolling out some new additions around instructor conflicts and even around like undelivered communications and so forth. But in this example, right today, I've got these various classes that are scheduled to run, and if I hover over, I can see I've got 5 different instructor issues here, and I've got 10 missing resources. And what I loved about this is when we were kind of initially showing this to some customers, they were like, we've got a good handle on this. We use Administrate, and we're familiar with the system. We've built some reports, and this isn't going to be a big deal, right? It's nice, but it's not super compelling. And so we're like, okay, fine. Like we're interested in feedback, and we would turn it on for them and start testing. As we turn it on, things would light up and they'd be like, oh my goodness. And they'd be like, we didn't realize that we had this problem, right? Because it had just happened or something along those lines. Another one that's really cool is fill rate is too low. Now, fill rate is a hugely important concept, particularly if you're selling your training, but also just for efficiency and metrics in general. And so the system allows you to basically set a target fill rate for all of the training that you run, and then also individually set per course what that target would be. And so you can then be alerted as you're getting closer and closer to this classroom being a date to run, that, hey, we're below target. So if I were to log in and drill down and check this out, I would see a whole bunch of different things. One, the top of my screen is kind of this like heads up display area. This is alerting me to the instructor issues and the missing resources. And I can scroll down here and I can see, you know what? I have no personnel assigned to this event. Either they were removed or they were never added. That's a problem. I can also go to, my outline here, and I can see I'm missing these resources that need to be booked against this event. And so it's just highlighting very clearly and quickly.
Ship bridge simulators. You got some
That's right. You
current
need
events
them.
here.
You can't really learn to drive a boat without a simulator. And the last thing that I'll kind of, and this fill rate, this one's green, but one of the things we love about this is a low fill rate is not necessarily a problem, right? It's just an opportunity to get more people on the course, right? And the way you can do that is actually we've got a whole system of being able to manage kind of inflow and intake and so forth. And you can actually see, the system will tell you how many people have logged an interest against this. Maybe they've sent a request. Maybe they've said, we need to think about this in the future. Your sales team, if you're selling your training, might be working them through a process, or your intake team might have them in a holding pen. We can set all that up, and you can quickly drill in and be like, okay, let's go find some people and let's call them or email them and say, hey, we've got these places available. Are you interested? And so really, one of the things that we're really proud of is once you start using Administrate, you can really increase your average fill rate. And that's just a massive metric on so many different angles. Lastly, tasks. You can set up a whole bunch of tasks in a CRM-like manner of things you need to do in the real world that are really important, like clean the simulator and refuel the simulator and stock the fridge with Coke and all this type of stuff. And these things are really important. They're all logged down here within the system, and you can see all these different things that you can template these out as well. And so anytime I run a class of this type, it will basically put out all of these different tasks that need to be done and who needs to do them and when they're due by. And again, it's all offset based. But again, at the top here, we're showing you've got one overdue. That's a problem, a bunch that are unstarted, and which some that are completed and so forth. So we're just bringing to light all the various things in a way that you can deal with them or not. This has been such a big feature. We've had so many customers say that this has, again, transformed how they work because they've got a safety net and the system's got their back and they don't have to worry about it. And they can focus on what's really important, which is getting more learners through.
Yeah, super cool. Super cool. Previously, that information was always there, but you had to go look for it.
Yeah.
That's why one of the advances I really like is just bringing all these dashboards up visually so you can just see the problems, fix the problems, where before you had to hunt the problems out. And so it's just another step towards productivity. Yeah, this is good stuff, John. Listeners, I'm sure anybody that's, lives their life in LMS or any administration, nothing you saw today exists, in learning management systems. And so, my advice to everybody is, if you're a large training organization, if you're putting out more than 100, more than 1,000, more than 5,000 course opportunities in a given year, this is mandatory stuff. Otherwise, you're just bleeding time and money and time and money. And that really rolls down to customer satisfaction too. Whether those customers are your employees or anybody else, that frustration of having things fall apart at the last minute, it also has an impact. And so just to see all these moving pieces in the air for me is you just forget about this kind of stuff. It happens out there, and it's amazing, quite frankly, in 2024 that we found something or you found something that hasn't been automated yet. in the world.
Yeah, it's
You know,
true.
everything else has been done already. So how has this not been done? How? And yeah, you described it because you came from there, and LMS companies are backing into there. Maybe 20 years ago, you know, before, you know, when some of the old ones were there, they were towing into this kind of stuff. But then when the cloud revolution came, they all stopped, you know, and they just focused on e-learning as the primary vehicle. And so, you know, anybody that has this problem was left to fend. So I'm thrilled. I'm an ROI guy. I love seeing it unlocked in new ways. And so every time we get together and I see what you guys are up to, I'm just thrilled because I know this space in general has to grow. This whole market that you're creating and have created is going to have to burgeon because, as I said, this is the only thing that's not automated in the world right now. And so, um, I can't believe it's going to take long. I think you're going to see the whole training management system space, and maybe there's even a bigger word for that. You know, learning operations or something like that. You know, that's his whole market. So, in any case, I'm super impressed, John. Thanks for the great detail, and it's amazing to see all the progress over the last year. Listeners, thanks for tuning into another one of our executive briefing series. You see now why this is my favorite series of content. You just can't see this kind of stuff in the world. If you're not on the Talent to Learning show here, getting a first look. But I encourage anybody that has these problems, go right out to getadministrate.com and you can start learning more information. Contact John, maybe see how he can save you some money. John, thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll be in touch with everybody.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
All
See
right.
you on the next.